Thank you, Simon, and thank you for the opportunity to start off with the standards in action. I think this is an important program that we have within ISO TC 211, and I think this topic is now very much important for us as a community to engage other groups that are now requiring spatial information. And Jennifer and I have been discussing bits and pieces of this for about 18 months around how does spatial and then health start to have this link into a better understanding of what's required in these domains. But I want to start off with some history around this and where we've come from and I think where we have to go to. So let's start with some of our key partners that have been really good for our community, and we've been really blessed by close collaborations with OGC, IHO, DigiWig and the UNGGIM. They have been a great avenues for us to not only have this relationship, but also to understand what is their requirements in their particular environments. And also we've been able to progress a number of our activities more broadly. And as we go into our existing liaisons, we have this internal and external environments that we have. And some have been really working well, and some has basically have been, as a group, we've been sort of engaging on an ad hoc basis and that sort of thing. So internally, I've just pulled out a couple of the top ones that I thought about originally. So TC 59, the BIM, and our work, we've started and we've had a couple of attempts at it. We've had a joint working groups and so forth about how do we get this modeling understanding of data information from the two communities, and then how do we progress more of the technical areas of integrating our models and so forth, which in some ways have been sort of successful, but we're getting there. The intelligence transportation system, we've also got a joint working group, and to get a better understanding around positioning and their geospatial graphic parts of their requirements in their domain, which is an important facet that we need to do. So sustainable cities and communities 268 is also one of those groups that have been significant in its development. It has a great relationship with the UN and around the Sustainable Development Goals. So therefore, it is an important facet, an important committee that we need to engage. And they are starting to look very seriously around geographic information for a smart city, which I think we've been doing in our space for 25 years, but it is something that the communities are now wanting this information. And the infrastructure that goes with that is an important facet. Externally, we've had some great relationships with Geodesy and the oil and gas producers, with Roger Lott and so forth, which have been fantastic, and the FIG, which they've submitted a number of programs for us to progress within our concept, specifically around the land administration domain model. So we've had these established already, internally and externally, and we've been progressing reasonably well on that front. But I like to start to have these notions around active or passive engagement. And overall, I think we've been doing, if you look at our engagements and our list of liaisons and how we're doing it, if I was going to categorize it, it's been generally passive, with occasionally active environments that we've been actively involved in. And that's my views, but others on the call and others may think that differently, but that's from my observation, it's mainly about being passive. But on saying that, we've been actively involved in recent times around the data exchange and sharing for communities infrastructure based on geographic information. And this is, I think, the start of our broader engagements through other communities that requiring spatial information. And we've had also an example just recently around the space industry and their definitions around positioning and so forth, which we've had to basically put in quite a bit of effort to inform that community about where positioning or where functions are around positioning. And then internally, externally around actively is around the food and agriculture and of the UN, which is assisting us in the land cover and land use, meta language and so forth. And of course, the land administration domain model that I've already mentioned. Passively, I think we've occasionally monitored around 207 around environmental management, and passively, I suppose, the World Meteorological Organizations. But again, this is I've just pulled out those two that I think there is probably opportunities for us to further engage that. So what's next? And this is just a list that brain dump from me around some of the topics and some of the areas that I think are going to challenge us as a community to really start to engage more actively as opposed passively. So we've had the transportation and ITS and so forth, and I think that's going to be more in the future than ever before. So that's one. Infrastructure, I think various infrastructure, and I've just had a look at one from the smart cities for tunnel utilities around their requirements for their system. They've got nothing to do, they have no reference around for them positioning or geospatial or geographic information at all in that standard at all. Urban planning, utilities, energy and health, and Jennifer's going to talk around health and how we've started to also utilises OGC's domain working group around health and so forth. And I think we need to look at that a bit more closely. And I'm sure Jennifer is going to present some of those further topics that we may start to think about. Building construction, we've already started, but I think this further work that we need to do. And so the domain modeling and so forth that means that the Canute is doing and leading and so forth is an important facet that we really get down to these areas. Tunneling underground is another one. Light poles, we've been discussing recently in Australia around how important light poles will be in the future around smart cities and what they're going to put into the light poles and so forth, the various sensors and so forth. So that's another area that we may need, we'll certainly need to do. Climate change and environmental is an important facet that not only the standards groups, but also industry and the financial sectors are starting to look at what's the impact on climate change in our environment and so forth. And we, reporting and those sorts of things. And geospatial information, or parts of that, will be of some benefit. Mining and agriculture and land cover and land use are pretty self-evident. Marine is another area that we've been assisting in, and IHO has done a fantastic job and references our number of our standards, and they've inputted into what their requirements and so forth, and international marine boundaries and so forth is also playing an important part in the future. Space is going to be, and from an Australian perspective, is when our country is new to space, but we've done a lot of work around the space components, about calibration and validation and so forth, and the sensors and so forth, which has been had been led by Doug quite a bit in working group 6, sorry. So that's another areas that I think that's going to be a more aggressive, I suppose, of collaboration. Statistical, we've quickly, a couple of years ago, looked at that, but I think statistically through the UNGGIM work will probably also increase, and unmanned systems and drones and so forth. So that's quite more than half a dozen of topics that we've been dealing with, and potentially I think is going to increase it. So how do we as a community start to better manage this future programs through our liaisons internally and externally? So I've taken this from the OGC's environment and about some of the technical trends and so forth, and you can see how what we can expect in our environment of coming forth, and the list of in black text of about some of the things that we will need to look at in various formats and parts or throughout the standards and so forth. And we're doing some of that really well, but we've got some challenges in front of us. 3D and 4D environments are going to be a significant program in the future. So that just gives you a list, and telecommunications about 5G, and I understand there's going to be, there's now talk about 6G and so forth, and how do we do that? Various sensors and observations and so forth will also come, and then of course the spatial data on the web and producing that more efficiently, and the systems that we're going to future develop through APIs and so forth. So that's just one of those areas of thinking. Again, and I've taken again this out of the OGC's meeting on the future directions of the clusters that we're responding to, and we can start to look at how we're going to allocate and see if I think maybe looking at our liaisons, we may start to think about how do we allocate or put these liaisons into the tech trend clusters, instead of having them all spread out and down the page where you see them on our website. That's well and good, but how do we then link back to some of these activities that we're dealing with? And I think what we need to look at is maybe saying for connected to autonomous cars and so forth, we may want to say we'll put 204 into that category under that headings and so forth, and the urban digital twins and smart cities, we may want to put 268 and those sorts of things. That's just a suggestion that we could think about and so forth going forth, a better understanding and managing some of our relationships, because they are getting complicated. And we're seeing across the profile common themes that are coming across to the various domains. So in ITS, there is positioning. In space, there's positioning and so forth. But we should be saying to those groups, here is our solution, or here is our methods of doing this sort of thing, instead of having it all over the shop. So, so coming back to specifically to Jennifer's presentation, next is, so I've been collecting some newspaper clippings for the last 12 to 18 months about out of the Australian Financial Review on health and data and so forth, and also using, this one is about postcodes and so forth, and how did New South Wales government start to use postcodes because of privacy and those sorts of things, of aggregating a bit more around that information. So this is just a clip out of that about as we know, or as most of you should know, is Australia basically on the eastern part of Australia last 2019-20 was burnt to a crisp, basically, and we're starting to use fire maps and so forth. That is one, but after that we lost quite a few, 30 odd people. So that, and a lot of people were injured and so forth. So the health part, and how do we respond to after disasters and so forth, and what's information's required from a spatial point to support the health environment also. So that's just one. The private industry is coming on board and have got a huge knowledge base and so forth, and we're seeing companies basically providing additional information and services. So this is another example of doctor care everywhere, but they're using or could have potentially about spatial information to assist in their business model and so forth. And this is another group of doctors and so forth around patients and so forth, and using where their patients are located and so forth. So again, it's location based. And finally, the data share is for healthcare and so forth as a community. And Jennifer is in Melbourne and lockdown. Last week, those people in Melbourne could only go 5 kilometres, and I can imagine a lot of people were saying, well, how far is 5 kilometres where I am, and how do I say that I'm on a map on their devices and so forth, how far they go. This week it's 10 kilometres, but again, it is around data and data sets and so forth around this. So that's just one example, just a paper clippings that I've been looking at from this point of view. So coming back to assistance from OGC and the futures directions topics from last year. So so the City of Things and the integrations of sensor data into the 3D models and so forth for a smart city, and then the digital twin and so forth, and how do we improve that? Traffic analysis for a digital twin and so forth, extracting insights into these satellite data to drive the urban environment and modeling and so forth. Health and the ethics around health, but also the ethics around geospatial and how we're going to deal with this. And that's going to be some of the challenges that we're going to have around that. The augmented reality and virtual realities and all sorts of things, and the simulation and modeling is going to, I think, going to be a significant component in going forth. And linked data and so forth. They were the major topics that OGC discussed. that I think the JAG and so forth, maybe we should start to have this discussion and communications around how are we going to do this. So finally, I've got a couple more. So these are the major themes. They're not extensive. These are just the ones that came to my thoughts fairly quickly. So smart cities and 3D and 4D, digital twins, smart grids, the climate and environment and marine. And then down that is the data integration. How do we start to inform, collaborate, understand other communities' requirements, and how do we then integrate this information? Because we may have to change ourselves to meeting the new technologies coming forth. APIs, I think, is going to be a significant driver. Sensors are going to be very important, and artificial intelligence and machine learning, there's also that. And the Internet of Things will also play a significant part. So what's next? And I think this is about the last one. Liaison, collaboration and dialogue. I think that's where we need to do more collaboration and dialogue with various communities. We can't do everything. I understand, and that we need to pick and choose what's important for us in the near and medium terms and so forth. We need to start to strengthen our liaisons and links with other TCs and other communities and industry and academia. It's just important. Exploit the models and the systems we already have, and I think we're starting to do that. I think we need to further leverage the work on the UNGGIM work. And also we've started to look at reviewing the liaison network to see what we can achieve and not achieve. So on that note, I'd like to finish up and at least give our community and everyone else some thoughts about how we're going to start approaching this. And we've got plenty of other speakers on the call today to highlight further topics that we may need and certainly need to address more broadly within our community. So thank you, Simon. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Chris, very much for giving us this really extensive overview how ISO TC211 is supporting other domains and industries with location information from the standardization point of view. I don't see for the moment any hand raised or questions in the chat box.